Marcus Webb almost shot the woman who would save his life without ever firing a bullet. Dawn had only just begun to bleed across the Arizona sky when he swung open the henhouse door. The hinges groaned in protest, metal against metal, a sound that had become as familiar to him as his own breathing. Inside, the chickens should have been settling on their roosts, clucking softly in that mindless way they did each morning. Instead, there was silence. The kind of silence that made a man's hand move instinctively toward the revolver at his hip. She was there in the straw, half risen, half kneeling. A dark shape against the pale gold light filtering through the warped slats of wood. Bits of hay clung to her hair like fragments of a broken crown. Dust streaked the sharp angles of her cheekbones. Her eyes, black as obsidian, met his without flinching. In each hand she held an egg. One had already cracked the yolk, dripping slowly between her fingers, thick and golden in the dim light. Marcus's revolver came up by habit, steady as his breath, steady as the years of loneliness that had taught him to trust nothing and no one. But then he saw them. Through the gaps in the wooden slats, two small faces pressed against the outside wall, a girl's hand thrown protectively across a little boy's chest, as if her thin arm could somehow stop a bullet meant for their mother. The girl couldn't have been more than 9 years old. The boy perhaps 6. Their eyes were enormous in their small faces, hollow with hunger, bright with fear. But there was something else there too. Defiance, the kind that comes from having already survived too much. For a long, blistered heartbeat, no one moved. The morning held its breath. The chickens forgotten, the cracked egg dripping, the gun steady in Marcus's weathered hand. Then the woman lifted her chin. Her voice, when it came, was soft but unbreakable, like river stones worn smooth by endless water. "I only need 2, she said, "for my children." Marcus had killed men before. In the war, in the years after, when the territory was still wild and justice came from the barrel of a gun rather than the stroke of a judge's pen. He knew what it felt like to pull a trigger, to watch the light leave someone's eyes, to carry that weight in the hollow places of your chest where better memories should have lived. But this was different. He lowered the gun. Slowly, the woman didn't move, didn't thank him, didn't plead. She simply waited, patient as the desert itself. "Come inside," Marcus heard himself say. "You can eat." The words felt foreign in his mouth. It had been 3 years since anyone had sat at his table. 3 years since he had spoken in more than a handful of words in a single day. 3 years since Victoria had walked out of his life and taken with her every soft thing he had ever known. The woman hesitated. Her eyes searched his face for lies, for traps, for the cruelty she had learned to expect from men who looked like him. Whatever she found there must have been enough. She gave a single measured nod. "My name is Ayanna," she said. The name settled into the air between them like smoke. Soft, lingering, carrying weight Marcus couldn't quite measure. He didn't offer his own name. Names meant ties. Ties meant caring. And caring had cost him more than he could afford to lose again. But when the little girl stepped into the light, her brown eyes wide and watchful, he heard himself speak before he could stop it. "I'm Marcus." Inside the cabin, shadows clung to the corners like old friends who had nowhere else to go. The morning sun struggled through windows Marcus hadn't bothered to clean in months. Dust motes drifted in the pale beams of light, visible and golden, silent witnesses to a solitude that had become as much a part of the structure as the cedar beams overhead. The water pot hissed on the stove. Marcus moved with the mechanical precision of a man who had performed these same tasks 1,000 times alone. He sliced what little bread remained from last week's baking, placed it on the table without ceremony. His movements were efficient, practiced, but beneath the calm exterior, his mind churned with questions he didn't know how to ask. Ayanna sat at the table with her children close beside her. She divided her portion with the precision of someone who had learned to make every crumb count. The girl received half, the boy received the other half. Ayanna touched nothing herself until she was certain her children had enough. Marcus watched this ritual without comment. He had seen hunger before, had felt it gnaw at his own belly during the lean years after Victoria left. But there was something different about watching a mother choose her children's survival over her own. Something that made the bread in his own mouth taste like ash and obligation. The boy ate slowly, savoring each bite as if it might be the last he would ever taste. The girl ate with her eyes on her mother, measuring, calculating, ready to give back half of what she had been given if it meant her mother would eat. No one spoke. The silence stretched and settled. Outside, the valley wind picked up, brushing against the cabin walls with the patience of something that had been waiting a very long time. Finally, Marcus cleared his throat. The sound was rough, unpracticed. "You traveled far," he said. Ayana nodded. Her voice when she answered was steady, despite the exhaustion that hung on her like a second skin. "Farther than I meant to." "Why here?" Marcus asked. She looked out the window toward the lone cottonwood tree in the distance. Its branches were bare and skeletal against the brightening sky. The tree had not bloomed in 7 years. Not since the year Marcus had believed his life still held promise. "The land felt quiet," Ayana said. "I hoped quiet meant safe." Marcus followed her gaze. He knew what it meant to come to this valley searching for safety, to arrive hoping that silence and distance would be enough to outrun the things that haunted you. He had learned slowly and painfully that some ghosts followed no matter how far you ran. "You and the children can stay," he said. The words came out rougher than he intended. "Just until you get your bearings." Ayana bowed her head slightly. Her spine remained straight, proud, unbroken by whatever had brought her to his door. "We don't need much," she said. "Just time." Marcus looked at the thin boy now dozing against his sister's side. Time. The one thing Marcus had in abundance. The one thing that had stretched before him like an endless desert since Victoria had spoken the words that shattered his world. "I can't live like this, Marcus. A childless woman on a dead farm. I deserve better." He pushed the memory away, forced himself back to the present, to the woman and children sitting at his table, to the choice he had already made the moment he lowered his gun. "Take the back room," he said. "It's small, but it's clean." Ayana met his eyes. For the first time, something in her expression softened. Not gratitude exactly, something deeper. Recognition, perhaps. The kind that passes between two people who have both learned what it means to survive when the world insists you shouldn't. "Thank you," she said. Marcus nodded once. Then he stood and walked outside before the tightness in his chest could become something he didn't know how to name. The sun climbed higher. Marcus worked the fence line along the eastern pasture, his hands moving with the mindless rhythm of labor that required no thought. Stretch the wire, hammer the nail, move to the next post, repeat. It was easier this way. Easier to let his body work while his mind wandered to places he usually kept locked away. He remembered the first time he had seen Victoria. She had been standing outside the general store in town, her golden hair catching the sunlight like spun honey. Her dress had been simple but clean. Her smile had been radiant. Marcus, dusty and rough from a week on the trail, had felt something in his chest shift and settle, as if a piece of himself he hadn't known was missing had suddenly clicked into place. Their courtship had been brief, practical. She was alone in a hard country. He had land and ambition. They married in the spring with wildflowers blooming and hope thick in the air. For a while it had been good, better than good. Victoria had made the cabin feel like a home. She had planted flowers, hung curtains, filled the rooms with laughter and the smell of fresh bread. They had talked about children, about the family they would build together, about the future that stretched before them like a promise. But the children never came. Year after year, Victoria's belly remained flat. Year after year, the hope in her eyes dimmed a little more. Marcus had told her it didn't matter, that they had each other, that love was enough. But it wasn't, not for Victoria. The doctor's words still echoed in Marcus's memory, clinical and cold. "I'm sorry, Mr. Webb. Your wife's condition makes pregnancy impossible." Victoria had wept. Marcus had held her, and for a time he thought they would weather it together. But Victoria's grief had curdled into something else. Resentment, bitterness, a growing conviction that she had wasted her life on a man and a homestead that could give her nothing she truly wanted. The day she left, the sky had been clear and blue, mocking in its beauty. "I won't waste any more years on this," she had said, her voice flat and final. "I'm going to San Francisco. Charles Ashford has asked me to marry him. He can give me the life I deserve." Marcus had stood in the doorway and watched her climb into the wagon, watched her disappear down the valley road without looking back, watched the dust settle in her wake like a funeral shroud. He hadn't cried, hadn't raged, hadn't done anything but close the door and continue living if the hollow routine that followed could be called living at all. Now, 3 years later, he hammered another nail into another post and wondered what Victoria would think if she could see him now, sheltering an Apache widow and her children, offering bread to people the territory still considered enemies. She would have been horrified, scandalized. She would have seen it as proof that Marcus had lost his mind along with his dignity. But Victoria was gone, and these people, these strangers with hungry eyes and careful hands, were here. That night, Marcus lay in his bed and stared at the ceiling. The cabin was different now, not empty. He could hear them in the back room, the soft rustle of blankets, the whisper of a mother's voice soothing her children. And then cutting through the darkness like a blade made of memory, a melody. Ayanna was singing, low and soft, an Apache lullaby that rose and fell with the ancient rhythm of wind over canyon walls. Marcus closed his eyes. The song pulled at something deep in his chest, something he had thought long dead. He had heard that song before, 10 years ago, maybe more. Back when he had been a soldier in the territorial campaigns. Back when his orders had been to clear the Apache from their ancestral lands. Back when he had believed because his commanders told him so that he was bringing civilization to a savage wilderness. He remembered a night, cold and star-bright. His unit camped at the edge of a canyon, and in the distance carried on the wind the sound of women singing, singing to children who would not live to see morning, singing because it was all they had left. Marcus had been young then, 22 and certain that the world was exactly as simple as his orders made it seem. He had not questioned, had not wavered, until the morning they were ordered to burn the village. Even now, lying in his bed a decade later, Marcus could smell the smoke, could hear the screams, could see the mother running with her daughter clutched to her chest, desperate and doomed. The officer in command had raised his rifle. Marcus had seen his finger tighten on the trigger, and something in Marcus, something he hadn't known existed, had moved his hand faster than thought. Don't, Marcus had said, his own rifle now aimed not at the fleeing woman, but at his commanding officer. The moment had stretched, taut as a wire. The officer had looked at Marcus with eyes cold as winter stone. Stand down, soldier. Marcus had held his ground. The woman had disappeared into the canyon, her daughter still clutched in her arms, her lullaby still echoing in the smoke-filled air. The officer had lowered his weapon. Marcus had been court-martialed, dishonorably discharged, cast out with nothing but the clothes on his back and the knowledge that he had saved 2 lives at the cost of his career. He had never regretted it, even now, even after everything. But he had carried the weight of what he had seen, what his hands had been part of, the burning, the dying, the systematic destruction of a people whose only crime was existing on land that others wanted. And now one of those people was sleeping in his home, singing the same song he had heard that night, trusting him not to be the monster he had almost become. Marcus turned over, pressed his face into the pillow, and for the first time in 3 years he allowed himself to feel something other than the dull ache of loneliness. He felt the faint, fragile stirring of hope. Morning came with the scent of coffee and something else, something Marcus couldn't immediately identify. He rose and dressed, moving quietly through the cabin's familiar spaces until he reached the main room. Ayanna was already awake, already working. She had cleaned the kitchen, scrubbed the counter, stacked the dishes. The coffee pot sat on the stove, steam curling from its spout, and on the table impossibly sat a small stack of flatbread still warm from the pan. Marcus stopped in the doorway, stared. Ayanna turned, met his eyes. There was no apology in her expression, no request for permission, just quiet competence and the subtle challenge of someone who refused to be a burden. You didn't have to do this, Marcus said. We are not guests, Ayanna replied. We are debt. Let me repay. Marcus stepped into the room, poured himself coffee with hands that felt strangely uncertain. There's no debt between people who share bread, he said. The words hung in the air. Ayanna studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded once. A small gesture, but it felt like an agreement, a contract written in silence and mutual understanding. Outside, the children were already at work. Nasha, the girl, moved with careful precision through the henhouse gathering eggs, with the gentle efficiency of someone who understood that roughness meant broken shells and wasted food. Kaylee the boy had found a stick and was drawing patterns in the dirt near the well. Meaningless swirls and lines that somehow looked like birds in flight. Marcus watched them from the porch. Something about the scene felt wrong. Not bad wrong, just unfamiliar. His homestead had been silent for so long, empty of anything but work and wind and the slow accumulation of dust. Now there were small voices, movement, life. It unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. Ayanna joined him on the porch. She followed his gaze to the children, to the garden plot beyond them, overgrown and neglected, more weeds than anything useful. "You stopped caring for this place," she said. It was not an accusation, just an observation. Marcus's jaw tightened. Nothing worth caring for anymore. Ayanna tilted her head slightly, looked at him with those dark, knowing eyes. "The garden doesn't care why you abandoned it. It only knows it wants to grow." She walked down the steps and across the yard before Marcus could respond. He watched her kneel in the dirt, her fingers sifting through the dry soil with the tenderness of someone greeting an old friend. Marcus stood there for a long moment. Then, against every instinct that told him to maintain distance to protect the walls he had built around himself, he went inside, retrieved the rusty shovel from the shed, and walked out to join her. They worked in silence. Marcus turned the earth. Ayanna sorted through what remained, separating the salvageable from the dead. Nasha helped her mother, her small hands quick and careful. Kale abandoned his stick drawings and began collecting stones to line the borders of what would become rows. The sun climbed higher. Sweat gathered on Marcus's brow. His muscles, accustomed to solitary labor, protested this new rhythm. But there was something almost peaceful about it. The shared effort, the quiet understanding that passed between them without need for words. At midday, when the heat became too fierce to continue, they retreated to the shade of the porch. Ayanna poured water from the well bucket into tin cups. The children drank deeply, then retreated to the back room for a nap. Marcus sat on the porch step. Ayanna sat beside him, not too close, but close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her skin, could smell the earth on her hands. "Your husband," Marcus said, then stopped, unsure how to continue, unsure if he had any right to ask. Ayanna was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was soft but steady. "His name was Dakota. He was a good man, a strong man." She paused. The reservation took that strength, slowly, like water wearing away stone. Marcus nodded. He knew about reservations, about the government's solution to the Apache problem. Round them up, confine them, let disease and despair do what bullets couldn't. "How long?" he asked. 6 months, Ayanna said. The sickness took him in 6 months. "I'm sorry." Ayanna turned to look at him. Really look at him, as if measuring the sincerity of his words against the weight of everything her people had endured. "Are you?" she asked. Marcus held her gaze. "Yes." Something shifted in her expression. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the beginning of belief. "We couldn't stay there," she continued. "After Dakota died, the children were starving. The rations they gave us were not enough. The water was bad. The sickness was everywhere." She looked down at her hands. "I chose to run rather than watch my children die." "How long have you been running?" 6 months. Marcus did the math. A year of death. A year of survival by any means necessary. A year of choosing life over lost safety, over submission. "You're safe here," he said. The words came out rougher than he intended. "As safe as I can make you." Ayanna's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Words are easy," she said. "I've learned to trust actions." Marcus met her eyes. "Then watch what I do." The moment stretched between them, fragile as glass, heavy as iron. Then Ayanna stood and went back to work in the garden. Marcus sat alone on the porch and wondered what he had just promised, and whether he would be able to keep it. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Marcus would wake before dawn. Ayanna would already have coffee brewing. They would work the land together. The children would help where they could. At night, they would eat simple meals in comfortable silence, and Ayanna would sing her children to sleep with melodies that made Marcus's chest ache with memories he couldn't quite reach. 2 weeks passed. The garden began to show signs of life. Small green shoots pushing through the soil, fragile, determined, refusing to stay buried. Then Samuel Moss arrived. Marcus heard the mule before he saw the man, the familiar braying, the steady clip of hooves on packed earth. He looked up from the fence post he was repairing and saw his only friend approaching along the valley road. Sam was 68, maybe 69, weathered enough to look older, weathered and worn as old leather, but his eyes were sharp and his mind sharper. He had been Marcus's neighbor for 15 years, had stood beside him through the hardest times, had never asked questions Marcus couldn't answer. Until now. Sam reined in his mule and sat there in the saddle, taking in the scene with eyes that missed nothing. Marcus straightening from his work, Ayanna kneeling in the garden, Nasha and Kaylee playing near the well, the wash hanging on the line, the smoke curling from the chimney. Well now, Sam said slowly, this is unexpected. Marcus wiped his hands on his pants, walked over to greet his friend with a handshake that said more than words could. Sam, Marcus said simply. Marcus, Sam replied. Then with a glance toward Ayanna, you want to tell me what's going on here? Marcus followed his gaze, saw Ayanna rise to her feet, saw the wariness in her posture, the readiness to run if needed. They needed help, Marcus said. I'm helping them. Sam swung down from his mule with a grunt, studied Marcus's face with the intensity of someone who had known him long enough to read the truth beneath the words. You know what folks in town are saying, Sam said quietly. I don't care what they're saying. Sam's expression darkened. Wade Garrett does, and what Wade cares about has a way of becoming everyone else's problem. Wade can go to hell. That's what I'm afraid of, Sam said, and he'll try to take you with him. The two men stood in silence, the weight of unspoken understanding heavy between them. Sam had seen enough of life to know that kindness often came with a price, especially kindness shown to those the world had decided weren't worth saving. Ayanna approached slowly, her steps careful, cautious. When she reached them, she inclined her head in a gesture of respect that spoke of cultures older than the territory itself. I am Ayanna, she said. Sam removed his hat, held it against his chest in a gesture that surprised Marcus with its old-world courtesy. Samuel Moss, ma'am, he said. Most folks just call me Sam. Ayanna's eyes searched his face, looking for judgment, for hostility, for the casual cruelty that had become as common as breathing in this land that hated her people. Whatever she found there must have been acceptable. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. If we bring trouble, we will leave, she said. Sam glanced at Marcus, then back to Ayanna. His voice when he spoke was gentle in a way Marcus had rarely heard. Trouble has a way of finding us, whether we invite it or not, Sam said. The question isn't whether it'll come. The question is what we do when it arrives. He turned to Marcus, fixed him with a look that held decades of hard-earned wisdom. Don't let the wind take something worthwhile before you know what it is, Sam said. Marcus felt heat rise in his chest, felt the familiar walls starting to rebuild themselves. I don't know what you think this is, Marcus started. Sam raised a hand. I think it's a man who's been half dead for 3 years, finally remembering what it means to be alive. And I think that's worth protecting. He settled his hat back on his head, climbed onto his mule with the stiffness of age and old injuries. I'll be around, he said. You need anything, you send word. Then he was gone, riding back down the valley road, leaving Marcus and Ayanna standing in the yard with questions neither of them knew how to answer. 2 weeks passed in a rhythm that felt almost like peace. Almost. But peace, Marcus had learned, was a luxury men like him could only borrow, never own. Nasha had been watching the other children walk past the homestead each morning, watched them with books under their arm and hope in their eyes. On the 14th morning, she finally spoke. Mama, she said quietly, I want to go to school. Ayanna's hand stopped mid-task. Marcus saw the fear flash across her face, the immediate instinct to say no, to keep her daughter close, to avoid the pain that came from reaching for things the world didn't want to give you. But Nasha's eyes held something Ayanna couldn't deny. The same determination that had carried them across hundreds of miles. The same refusal to accept that her future had to be smaller than her dreams. Marcus stepped forward. I'll take her, he said. Make sure she gets there safe. Ayanna looked between them, her daughter, this man who had somehow become more than shelter. Finally, she nodded. One sharp movement. Permission given even as fear clutched at her heart. The schoolhouse sat at the edge of town, a simple wooden building with a bell tower and windows that caught the morning light. Miss Clara Brennan stood outside greeting students as they arrived. She was young for a teacher, 25 at most, but there was steel in her spine that said she had not come to Arizona territory to play it safe. Her eyes widened when she saw Marcus approach with Nasha. "Mr. Webb," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "What can I do for you?" "This is Nasha," Marcus said. "She wants to learn." Clara Brennan looked at the girl, at her clean dress, her carefully braided hair, her eyes bright with intelligence and hunger for knowledge. Then she looked at Marcus, at the quiet challenge in his expression, the unspoken question, will you be like the others or will you be better? Clara made her choice. "Come inside, Nasha. Let's see what you know." The morning started well enough. Nasha sat at a desk in the back, quiet, watchful. The other children stared, some with curiosity, some with the casual cruelty children learn from their parents. But no one spoke to her. No one threw anything. And for the first hour that felt like victory. Then Billy Garrett arrived late. He was 11, big for his age, with his father's mean eyes and his father's conviction that some people mattered and some people didn't. He saw Nasha and stopped, stared, then smiled in a way that made Marcus's earlier warning to his father seem prophetic. "What's this?" Billy said loudly. "We letting savages in school now." Clara's voice cut sharp. "Billy Garrett. Sit down and be quiet." But Billy had an audience, had a chance to prove himself in front of the other children. He swaggered to Nasha's desk. "My pa says your kind killed his uncle," Billy said. "Says you are all murderers and thieves." Nasha kept her eyes on her slate, said nothing. Marcus had taught her this. When people try to make you small, you don't have to help them. Billy didn't like being ignored. He grabbed the book from Nasha's desk, flipped through it with exaggerated disgust. "Can you even read?" he mocked. "Or do savages just look at the pictures?" Clara was moving toward them now. But Billy was faster. Nasha had drawn something during the morning lesson. A small sketch of her mother, simple, beautiful, the only picture she had of Ayana's face. Billy saw it, grinned, and tore it in half. The sound of ripping paper echoed in the suddenly silent classroom. Nasha moved without thinking. Years of protecting her younger brother. Years of surviving in a world that took everything. Her hand shot out, shoved Billy hard. He stumbled backward, shocked, then fell. The classroom erupted. Clara reached them just as Billy scrambled to his feet, face red with humiliation and rage. "Billy outside. Now, and Nasha, you too." But the damage was done. Billy ran, not outside, out the door completely, and Marcus, who had been waiting in the yard, saw him go, saw the boy's face, knew exactly what came next. Billy went straight to his father's ranch. An hour later, Wade Garrett rode up to the schoolhouse with Billy on the saddle behind him. Marcus straightened from where he'd been checking his horse's hooves. Wade dismounted, walked straight past Marcus to the schoolhouse door, pounded on it with his fist. Clara Brennan opened it. Her face was calm, but Marcus could see her hands trembling. "Your savage student attacked my son," Wade said. "I want her expelled. Today." Billy pushed her, friend of the other children said from inside. Tore up her drawing first. Wade ignored this, focused on Clara. Well, Clara Brennan was young, was new, had everything to lose. But she looked at Nasha standing in the corner holding the torn pieces of her drawing. Looked at Billy with his crocodile tears and practiced outrage. Made her choice. "Nasha stays," Clara said. "She defended herself against bullying. That's not grounds for expulsion." Wade's face went dark. "You're making a mistake." The only mistake, Marcus said, stepping up behind Wade, is you thinking you can intimidate everyone. Wade spun. The two men faced each other in the schoolhouse yard. Students pressed against windows, Clara standing in the doorway with Nasha behind her. "This isn't over," Wade said. His constant refrain, his promise, and his curse. "Never is," Marcus replied. Wade mounted his horse, jerked Billy up behind him, rode away with a look that promised blood and fire. Marcus looked at Clara. "Thank you." She nodded, shaky but certain. "Send her back tomorrow. She's welcome here." That evening, Marcus told Ayana what had happened. Nasha sat between them, the torn drawing carefully pressed, flat both pieces saved. "Did I do wrong?" Nasha asked. Pushing him, Marcus put his hand on her shoulder. "No, you stood up for yourself. That's never wrong. But they hate us more now," Nasha said. her voice small. They hated us already, Ayana said gently. You just refused to let them make you small. That's strength, daughter. Never apologize for it. Nasha nodded, held the torn drawing close, and Marcus saw in her eyes the same fire he saw in her mother's, the same refusal to break. Outside the valley, wind picked up, carrying the scent of coming trouble, of Wade Garrett's rage building like a storm, of the confrontation that was no longer a question of if, but when. That evening, after the children were asleep, Marcus found himself on the porch again. Ayana joined him without asking. They sat in silence as the stars emerged one by one from the darkening sky. Your friend is a good man, Ayana said. He is. He knows something of loss. Marcus nodded, lost his son years ago, and the woman his son loved. Ayana absorbed this, how Marcus hesitated. Then because she had shared her story, because silence felt like cowardice, he told her. Sam's son fell in love with an Apache woman, wanted to marry her. Some men in town didn't approve. They killed her. Sam's son went after them, got himself killed too. Ayana's breath caught when 18 years ago. They sat with that knowledge, with the weight of history repeating itself in smaller, quieter tragedies, with the understanding that hatred once planted grew roots deeper than any garden. I'm sorry, Ayana said. So is Sam, been carrying it ever since. Another silence, longer this time, heavy with things neither of them could change. Finally, Ayana spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. They will come for us. You know this. Marcus knew, had known from the moment he let them stay, from the moment he lowered his gun in the henhouse and chose mercy over fear. Yes, he said, and you will let us go when they do. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, an expectation. The learned response of someone who had been abandoned too many times to believe protection could last. Marcus turned to look at her, really look at her, at the strength in her face, at the determination that had carried her across hundreds of miles with two small children and nothing but hope that somewhere, somehow, the world might have a place for them. No, he said, I won't. Ayana's eyes widened. You don't understand what you're saying, what it will cost. I understand perfectly. They will destroy you. Marcus felt something hard and certain settle in his chest, like a lock clicking into place, like a door closing on the man he used to be and opening on someone he was only beginning to know. Then they'll have to destroy me, he said, because you're not going anywhere. The next morning, Marcus rode into town. The town of Ironwood sat in the valley like a collection of broken teeth. Weathered buildings lined a single dirt street. Dust perpetually hung in the air, stirred by wind and wagon wheels, and the restless movements of people who had learned that survival required constant vigilance. Marcus rode in slowly, his horse picking its way through ruts worn deep by years of commerce and conflict. He had not come to town in 3 weeks. Not since the morning he had given Ayana and her children shelter. Not since he had made the choice that he knew with the certainty of a man who understood how small communities worked would have consequences. The general store stood at the center of town. Martha Hendricks ran it with the practical efficiency of a woman who had buried 2 husbands and learned that grief was a luxury she couldn't afford. She was one of the few people in Ironwood Marcus could call decent. Not friendly exactly, but fair. And fairness in this territory counted for more than friendship. Marcus tied his horse to the rail and stepped onto the wooden boardwalk. The sound of his boots echoed in the morning quiet. Inside the store, the familiar smells greeted him. Coffee, tobacco, leather, the accumulated scent of 1,000 transactions between people who needed things they couldn't grow or make themselves. Martha looked up from her ledger. Her eyes registered surprise, then something more complicated. Concern, perhaps, or warning. Marcus, she said, been a while. Has been. Marcus agreed. He moved through the store gathering supplies. Flour, salt, coffee, extra blankets. Things a man living alone didn't need in such quantities. Martha watched but said nothing, just tallied the items with swift, practiced movements. As Marcus counted out coins, the door opened behind him. He didn't need to turn to know who it was. The sudden tension in Martha's shoulders told him everything. Well, well, a voice drawled. If it isn't Marcus Webb himself. Marcus turned slowly. Wade Garrett stood in the doorway, backlit by morning sun. He was a big man, not tall but broad, built like a bull with the same mean temperament. At 35, he owned more land than anyone else in the valley. His father had taken it by force during the Apache conflicts. Wade had inherited both the property and the conviction that violence was the appropriate response to anything that threatened his vision of how the world should be. Wade, Marcus said evenly. Wade stepped into the store. Behind him came Dax Rimmer, his constant shadow. Dax was thin where Wade was thick, quick where Wade was deliberate, and twice as cruel. Together, they moved through Ironwood like a blight, taking what they wanted and leaving wreckage in their wake. Heard you got yourself some company out at your place, Wade said. His tone was conversational. Too conversational. The kind of casual that preceded violence the way storm clouds preceded rain. Marcus met his gaze without flinching. That's right, Apache, ain't they? They are. Wade's smile didn't reach his eyes. That's interesting. Real interesting. Especially considering what happened to my uncle. Killed by Apaches back in '73. Scalped and left to rot in the sun. I'm sorry for your loss, Marcus said. But that was 10 years ago, and it wasn't these people. All the same to me, Wade said. Apache is Apache, and we don't want them here. Martha's voice cut through the tension. Wade, this is my store. If you got business here, conduct it and move on. Wade ignored her, kept his eyes fixed on Marcus with the focused intensity of a predator who had spotted prey. You're making folks nervous, Webb. They're saying maybe you've lost your senses. Maybe spending 3 years alone out there turned your brain to mush. People can say what they want, Marcus replied. Doesn't change anything. It will when those savages bring more of their kind. When they start stealing, killing. You think you're being charitable, but you're opening a door that should stay closed. Marcus felt anger rise in his chest. Hot. Sharp. He forced it down, kept his voice level. They're a widow and 2 children, Wade. Not an invading army. Wade stepped closer. Close enough that Marcus could smell the whiskey on his breath despite the early hour. Close enough to make the threat unmistakable. Get rid of them, Wade said quietly, or I will. Marcus held his ground. Is that a threat? It's a promise. The 2 men stared at each other. The store had gone silent. Even the usual sounds from the street outside seemed to have paused, waiting, watching. Finally, Marcus spoke. His voice was soft, but carried the weight of absolute certainty. You come near my property, Wade, and you'll regret it. Wade's face darkened. You threatening me, Webb? I'm telling you how things are. For a moment, Marcus thought Wade might swing, saw the calculation in the bigger man's eyes, the weighing of odds, the measuring of consequences. Then Wade stepped back, but the smile on his face was poisonous. This ain't over, he said, not by a long shot. He turned and walked out. Dax followed. The door swung shut behind them with a sound like a coffin lid closing. Martha exhaled slowly. You just made yourself an enemy, Marcus. Had him already, Marcus said. Just never gave him reason to act on it before. He gathered his supplies and left. Behind him, Martha shook her head and returned to her ledger, already composing in her mind the story she would tell when people asked. And they would ask. In a town like Ironwood, nothing stayed secret for long. Marcus rode home with the supplies and the certain knowledge that he had just lit a fuse. The only question now was how long before it burned down to the powder. A week passed. Marcus worked the land with Ayanna and the children. They expanded the garden, repaired the chicken coop, fixed the sagging porch. Small tasks. Necessary tasks. The kind that made a house feel less like a refuge from the world and more like a place worth defending. In the evenings after the children were asleep, Marcus and Ayanna would sit on the porch and talk. Not about the past, not about the future, just about the day. What grew, what needed attention, what small victories they had won against the stubborn earth. But underneath every conversation ran a current of awareness, of waiting, of knowing that peace was temporary and violence was patient. Then on a Tuesday morning, Marcus discovered 3 of his cattle missing. He found the gap in the fence first. Wire cut clean, not torn by an animal or weakened by weather, cut deliberately with tools. The tracks led east toward the Red Rock country. Multiple horses, multiple riders, the cattle driven hard and fast. Marcus stood at the fence line and felt cold certainty settle in his gut. This wasn't random theft. This was a message. He told Ayanna what he'd found, watched her face close down into that careful blankness he had learned to recognize as fear held rigidly in check. They want you to blame us, she said quietly. They want you to send us away. I know. What will you do? Marcus looked at the horizon, at the dust devils dancing across the valley floor, at the hard, unforgiving beauty of a land that gave nothing freely and took everything it could. I'm going to get my cattle back, he said. He rode out at noon, followed the tracks through the valley and into the broken country beyond. The trail was obvious, too obvious. Whoever had done this wanted to be followed, wanted the confrontation. The tracks led to Wade Garrett's ranch. Marcus sat his horse on a ridge overlooking Wade's property, saw his cattle in a holding pen near the barn, saw Wade and Dax and two other men lounging in the shade, waiting. Marcus rode down slowly, gave them time to see him coming, time to make their choices. Wade stood as Marcus approached. That smile again. Poison and pleasure mixed in equal measure. Something I can help you with, Webb. Those are my cattle, Marcus said. Wade glanced at the pen as if noticing the animals for the first time. Are they now? Must have wandered over. You know how cattle are. Stupid creatures. Can't tell one piece of land from another. They didn't wander. Someone cut my fence and drove us here. That's a serious accusation, Wade said. You got proof I got my cattle in your pen. Wade shrugged. Could be they just followed the smell of better feed. Your land's been looking pretty sorry lately. Maybe they were looking for a place that could actually support them. Marcus dismounted, walked toward the pen with steady, deliberate steps. Wade moved to block him. Where you think you're going to get my property? Wade's hand dropped to the gun at his hip. Not so fast. You want these cattle, you're going to have to prove they're yours. And even then, there's the matter of grazing fees. Can't have your stock eating my grass for free. Marcus stopped, looked at Wade with eyes that had seen too much violence to be intimidated by the promise of more. Move aside, he said quietly. Or what? Or I move you. Wade laughed, but there was an edge to it, an uncertainty, because Marcus wasn't backing down, wasn't showing fear, was just standing there with the patience of a man who had made his decision and would see it through regardless of cost. You really want to do this over a few head of cattle, Wade asked. I really want to do this over a principle, Marcus replied. You stole from me, I'm taking back what's mine. It's that simple. The other men had risen now, hands on weapons, the air thick with the potential for bloodshed. Then Samuel Moss's voice cut through the tension. Afternoon, gentlemen. Everyone turned. Sam sat on his mule at the edge of the property. In his hands, he held a rifle, not pointed at anyone, just held. Present, meaningful, Sam Wade said. This doesn't concern you. Cattle theft concerns everyone, Sam said mildly. It's the kind of thing that can give a valley a bad reputation. Make decent folks wonder if the law means anything anymore. There's no theft here, Wade protested. These cattle wandered onto my land. Sam nudged his mule forward, squinted at the holding pen. Those are Marcus's cattle, all right. I helped him brand them myself last spring. That's his mark clear as day. Wade's jaw tightened. You calling me a liar? I'm calling you a man who seems to have mistaken someone else's property for his own, Sam said. Easy mistake to make. I'm sure you'll want to correct it before word gets around that you're running stolen stock. The standoff held for another long moment. Then Wade spat into the dust and stepped aside. Take your damn cattle, he said to Marcus. But this isn't finished. Marcus opened the pen, drove his cattle out, mounted his horse and started them moving toward home. Sam rode alongside, rifle still ready, watching Wade and his men until they were out of range. When they were safely away, Sam spoke. You know what this was about. I know. He's trying to make you choose. Your cattle or your guess. He's going to be disappointed. Sam was quiet for a while. Then, Marcus, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you years ago. Marcus glanced at his friend, saw something in the old man's face he'd rarely seen before. Regret, deep and old and still bleeding. What is it? Not here, Sam said. Tonight. Come by my place after supper. That evening, Marcus rode to Sam's homestead. The old man lived in a cabin even smaller than Marcus's. But it was neat, orderly, the home of someone who had learned to find peace in simplicity. Sam had coffee waiting. They sat on his porch in the gathering dusk and listened to the coyotes beginning their nightly chorus. I told you my son died, Sam said without preamble. Told you it was over an Apache woman. What I didn't tell you was why it still haunts me. He paused, drew a breath that seemed to cost him something. Her name was Helona. She was beautiful, kind. Thomas loved her with the kind of love that doesn't ask permission, doesn't care about consequence. They were going to marry. I told them not to, told Thomas he was throwing his life away, told him no good could come of it. Sam's hands tightened on his coffee cup. I was wrong, and my being wrong got them both killed. He stood, went inside, returned with a small wooden box worn smooth by years of handling. He opened it. Inside lay a beaded bracelet, intricate, beautiful. The kind of work that took months and spoke of love in every carefully placed bead. This was Helona's, Sam said. Thomas gave it to her the night he proposed. She was wearing it when they killed her. Marcus felt something heavy settle in his chest. Sam, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Sam interrupted, because I see you making the choice I couldn't make. I see you standing up for something I was too afraid to defend. And I need you to know that I support you, that if it comes to a fight, you won't stand alone. He held out the bracelet. Give this to Ayanna, he said. Tell her it comes with the blessing of a foolish old man who learned too late that love matters more than fear. Marcus took the bracelet, felt the weight of it, not just the physical weight, but everything it represented. Loss, regret, second chances. Thank you, Sam. The old man nodded. Just don't make my mistakes, Marcus. Don't wait until it's too late to fight for what matters. Marcus rode home under a sky crowded with stars. The bracelet was a small, solid weight in his pocket, a reminder that he was not the first to walk this path, not the first to choose love over safety, and that the code, whatever it might be, was one that others had paid before him. He found Ayanna on the porch. She rose as he approached, concern in her eyes. Everything all right, Marcus dismounted, climbed the steps, stood before her with the bracelet in his hand. Sam wanted you to have this, he said. It belonged to someone he loved, someone who died because the world couldn't accept her. Ayanna took the bracelet with trembling fingers, studied it in the moonlight. When she looked up, there were tears in her eyes. This is Chiricahua work, she whispered. Old style. Beautiful. Her name was Helona, Marcus said. She was going to marry Sam's son, but hatred got there first. Ayanna closed her hand around the bracelet, held it against her heart. There is so much pain in this land, she said. So much loss. Yes, Marcus agreed. But there's also this. People who refuse to let hatred win. People who choose to love even when it costs everything. He reached out, took her free hand in his, felt the warmth of her skin, the strength in her fingers. I need to tell you something, he said. Something I should have told you sooner. And there on the porch, under the stars, Marcus told her everything. About his time as a soldier, about the campaigns against the Apache, about the villages burned and the orders followed, and the night he had finally refused. The night he had let a mother and daughter escape rather than watch them die. He told her about the lullaby, about how it had haunted him for 10 years, about how hearing her sing it that first night had felt like the universe offering him a chance at redemption he didn't deserve. When he finished, Ayanna was silent for a long time. Marcus waited, ready for her to pull away, ready for her to see him as the enemy he had been. Instead, she stepped closer, placed her hand on his chest, right over his heart. You carry guilt for things you cannot change, she said softly, for choices made by young men who did not yet know who they would become. I hurt your people. You also saved them. That mother you let go, that daughter, they lived because of your mercy. Marcus felt something break open in his chest, something he had kept locked away for so long, he had forgotten it was there. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Ayanna smiled, sad and knowing and infinitely gentle. Forgiveness is not something we earn, she said. It is something we give, and I give it freely. She stood on her toes, kissed him softly on the cheek, then stepped back, the bracelet still clutched in her hand. Thank you, she said, for the gift, for the truth, for choosing to be more than your past. She went inside, left Marcus standing alone in the darkness with the stars overhead and a feeling in his chest he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. 2 weeks later, Cale fell ill. It started with a cough, small at first, the kind every child gets, but it worsened quickly. By the third day, his small body was burning with fever. By the fourth, he could barely breathe. Ayanna tried everything she knew. Apache remedies passed down through generations. Herbs, poultices, steam. Nothing worked. Kaylee grew weaker. His breath became a thin whistle. His eyes, when they opened, were glassy and unfocused. On the fifth day, Ayana came to Marcus. She had not slept, had not eaten, had spent every moment at her son's bedside willing him to live through sheer force of maternal determination. "He needs a doctor," she said. Her voice was steady, but Marcus could hear the desperation beneath it, the terror. Marcus looked at Kale, saw death circling, saw a small boy losing a fight he was too young to understand. "Town has a doctor," Marcus said. "We'll take him." Ayana's face went pale. "They will not help. They will see what we are and turn us away. Then we'll make them help." Marcus saddled his fastest horse, lifted Kaylee's fevered body into Ayana's arms as she mounted. The boy was light, too light, his breathing shallow and rapid. They rode through the night, 10 miles of rough country. Ayana held her son and whispered prayers in Apache. Marcus pushed the horse as hard as he dared. Every minute counted. Every second was borrowed from a debt they might not be able to repay. They reached Ironwood at 3 in the morning. The town was dark and silent. Only a few lamps burned in windows, where insomniacs or drunkards kept vigil against the night. Marcus rode straight to the doctor's house, a neat white building on the edge of town. He dismounted, pounded on the door, pounded until his fist ached and his knuckles split. A light appeared. Footsteps. The door opened. Whitmore stood there in his nightshirt, 60 years old, gray-bearded, eyes sharp even at this ungodly hour. His gaze went from Marcus to Ayana to the limp child in her arms. "Inside," he said without hesitation. They carried Kel into the examination room, laid him on the table. The boy's breathing was terrible now. Ragged, fighting, losing. Whitmore moved with practiced efficiency. Listened to Kayla's chest, checked his eyes, his throat, felt the heat radiating from his small body. "Pneumonia," Whitmore said. "Advanced. How long has he been like this?" 5 days, Ayana whispered. Whitmore looked at her, really looked at her, and something changed in his expression. Something Marcus couldn't immediately identify. "What is your name?" Whitmore asked. "Ayana." The doctor went very still. "Ayana, daughter of Cochetta." Ayana's eyes widened. "You know my mother?" Whitmore's hands trembled slightly as he turned back to Kayla. "I knew her. 20 years ago. She saved my life." He began preparing medicines, moving with renewed urgency. "I was fresh from medical school," he said as he worked. "Arrogant, foolish. Got lost in the desert, wounded by bandits. Your mother's people found me, brought me back to their camp. Cochetta healed me, taught me, kept me alive when I should have died." Ayana watched him work on her son, tears streaming down her face. "Is she still alive?" Whitmore asked. "No," Ayana said. "She died in the reservation. From the white man's sickness." Whitmore's jaw tightened. "I'm sorry. She was a healer without equal. She taught me things no university could." He looked at Ayana with eyes full of old grief and new determination. "I owe your mother my life," he said. "I will not let her grandson die. Not while I have breath and skill to prevent it." He worked through the night. Ayana and Marcus stood vigil, watching, praying in their own ways to gods that might or might not be listening. As dawn broke, Kaylee's breathing eased. The fever began to break. Color returned to his small face. Whitmore sagged against the table, exhausted, triumphant. "He'll live," the doctor said. "But he needs rest, days of it. He can stay here." Outside, the town was waking, and with the dawn came trouble. Wade Garrett and 6 of his men stood in the street. Word had spread. An Apache woman in town, an Apache child in the doctor's house. To Wade and those like him, it was an invasion, a violation, an opportunity. "Get them out," Wade demanded when Marcus stepped onto the porch. "We don't want their kind here." Marcus looked at the 7 men, at Wade's smug certainty, at the rifles they carried with the casual ease of men who believed might made right. "The boy is sick," Marcus said. "He stays until he's well." "Like hell he does." Daughter Whitmore appeared in the doorway behind Marcus. He held his own rifle. "Old but well-maintained." "This is my house," Whitmore said. "My patient. He stays." Wade's face darkened. You too, Doc. You're defending these savages. I'm defending a child, Whitmore said. If you have a problem with that, it says more about you than about them. Sheriff Holloway arrived then, a weak man, political, more interested in keeping the peace than pursuing justice. But even he could see which way the wind was blowing. Everyone calm down, Holloway said. Wade, the boy's sick. Doc Whitmore's treating him. That's the end of it. The hell it is, Wade snarled, but he saw the numbers. Marcus, Whitmore. The sheriff, however, reluctantly, and gathering behind them, drawn by the commotion, other townspeople. Martha, the blacksmith, Owen, Miss Brennan, the school teacher. Not a majority, but enough to give him pause. This ain't over, Wade said, his favorite refrain, his constant promise. He turned and walked away. His men followed. But Marcus knew with absolute certainty, the real confrontation was coming. This was just the prelude. Cale recovered over 3 days. Ayanna never left his side. Marcus brought food, kept watch. Dr. Whitmore came and went, checking on his patient, sharing stories about Cocheta building a bridge between the past and present. On the third night with Cale sleeping peacefully at last, Marcus and Ayanna stood outside under the stars. You could have died, Ayanna said quietly. Coming here, standing against Wade. Marcus looked at her, at the woman who had wandered into his life with nothing but 2 children and hope, at the person who had somehow, without trying, made him want to be better than he was. I would have died before I let Kaylee suffer, he said. Ayanna turned to face him fully. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. Why, she asked. Why do you do this for us? Marcus didn't have a clever answer. Didn't have philosophy or reasoning, just had the truth. Simple and undeniable. Because I love you, he said. I didn't plan to, didn't expect to, but I do. I love you and I love those children. And I would stand against the whole territory if that's what it took to keep you safe. Ayanna made a sound, half laugh, half sob. She stepped forward, kissed him. Not on the cheek this time, on the lips, soft and fierce and filled with every emotion neither of them had words for. When they pulled apart, she was smiling through her tears. I love you too, she whispered. You gave us a home when the world gave us nothing. They stood together in the darkness, 2 broken people who had found in each other something worth healing for. Inside, Kello stirred and called for his mother. Ayanna went to him. Marcus followed, and they sat together through the night, a family in all but name, waiting for morning and whatever it would bring. 4 days later, Wade called for a town meeting. Marcus received the summons from Sheriff Holloway. Not a request, a demand. The whole town would be there. Wade had made sure of it. Marcus rode in alone. Left Ayanna and the children at home with Sam standing guard. Whatever happened, he wanted them safe. The town hall was packed. 40 people at least. Farmers, ranchers, shopkeepers, the curious and the committed. Marcus recognized most of them, had done business with many, had considered some friends. Now they looked at him with a mixture of pity and contempt. Wade stood at the front, in his element. He waited until everyone was settled before beginning. We all know why we're here, Wade said. Marcus Webb has been harboring Apaches on his property, a woman and 2 children. Now some of you might think that's Christian charity. I say it's dangerous stupidity. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Wade continued. My uncle was killed by Apaches. So was Ben Harris's brother, and Sarah Thompson's first husband. We've all lost someone to their savagery. And now Webb wants us to just forget that, to welcome them into our community like nothing ever happened. It wasn't these people, Marcus said from the back. His voice cut through the noise. It was their tribe, their warriors, not a widow and children. Same blood, Wade shot back. Same hate. You think just because she smiles and works in your garden that she's changed, that her kind can be trusted. Martha stood. I've met Ayanna. She helped me when my husband was sick. Used herbs I'd never heard of. He recovered. She asked for nothing in return. Miss Clara Brennan rose next. Her daughter Nasha is the brightest student I've taught in 5 years. She reads better than children twice her age. She deserves an education. Dr. Whitmore spoke from the side. Ayanna's mother saved my life 20 years ago. The Apache know medicine we've forgotten. They're not savages. They're people trying to survive, just like us. Wade's face reddened. You're all fools. Bleeding hearts who think kindness will make them love us. But they don't love. They don't feel like we do. They're animals dressed in human skin. Marcus moved forward, slowly. Every eye in the room turned to him. You want to call them animals, Wade, fine. But I've seen what we did to them. I was there. I served in the campaigns. I watched us burn their villages, rape their women, kill their children. We took their land and their lives and their dignity, and then we shoved them onto reservations where we let them starve. The room had gone silent. So yes, Marcus continued, some of them fought back. Some of them killed. And maybe if we'd done to your family what we did to theirs, you'd have fought too. You'd have killed too. Because that's what people do when everything they love is taken from them. He stood in front of Wade now, close enough to see the hate burning in the other man's eyes. Ayanna is not your enemy, Marcus said. She's a widow trying to raise her children. That's all. And if you can't see past your own hate long enough to recognize her humanity, then you're the savage here, not her. Wade's hand moved toward his gun. Marcus didn't flinch. You son of a bitch, Wade hissed. Sheriff Holloway stood. That's enough. We'll take a vote. Those in favor of asking Webb to remove the Apache from his property, raise your hands. Hands went up. Marcus counted. 22. Those opposed, more hands. Marcus counted again. 18. The vote went against him, but it was closer than Wade had expected. Sheriff Holloway cleared his throat. As long as they remain on Webb's private property and cause no trouble, I see no legal grounds to remove them. This meeting is adjourned. Wade's face went purple. You're making a mistake, all of you. When they come for your families, don't say I didn't warn you. He stormed out. Half the room followed. The other half remained. Some came to Marcus, shook his hand, offered quiet words of support. But Marcus knew that support was one thing. Standing up when Wade came with torches and guns was another. He rode home as the sun set, found Ayanna on the porch, told her everything. She listened without speaking. When he finished, she took his hand. They will come for us, she said. You know this. Marcus knew, had known from the beginning. Then we'll be ready, he said. Over the next week, Marcus prepared. He reinforced the fences, bought extra ammunition, taught Ayanna to shoot. She learned quickly, her hands steady, her eyes sharp. Nasha and Kel learned where to hide if trouble came. The root cellar, dark and safe and hidden behind a false wall Marcus built himself. Sam came every evening, helped fortify, brought supplies, never spoke of leaving, never suggested that Marcus reconsider. On the 7th night as they sat on the porch after the children were asleep, Marcus turned to Ayanna. If I die, he began. She placed her fingers over his lips. You won't. If I die, he continued, taking her hand, promise me you'll run. Take the children and go. Don't stay here. Don't try to fight. Ayanna's eyes flashed. I am Apache. We know how to fight. I know, Marcus said, but fighting isn't always the answer. Sometimes survival means running. Sometimes it means living to raise your children. She was quiet for a long moment. Then I will run only if you fall, and I will raise our children to remember the man who loved them enough to die for them. Our children, Marcus said. You said our children. Ayanna smiled. That is what they are now. Isn't it? Marcus pulled her close, kissed her with all the desperate tenderness of a man who knows time is running out. When they pulled apart, both had tears in their eyes. I love you, he said. I love you too. That night, Marcus lay awake listening to the wind, wondering if tomorrow would bring Wade and his men, wondering if he would live to see Nasha and Kaylee grow up, wondering if the choice he had made, the stand he had taken, would cost him everything. But when he thought about going back, about sending Ayanna away, about returning to the hollow emptiness of his life, before she came, he knew he couldn't do it, wouldn't do it. Some things were worth dying for. Love was one of them. The next evening, Sam arrived with news. They're coming, the old man said. Tonight, Wade and at least 8 men. I heard them planning at the saloon. Marcus felt everything inside him go cold and hard. How long? Few hours, maybe less. He turned to Ayanna. Get the children in the cellar. Now. She didn't argue, just gathered Nasha and Kaylee and disappeared into the house. Sam climbed onto the roof. Marcus loaded rifles, checked ammunition, positioned himself on the porch where he could see the road. And then they waited. The sun sank toward the horizon. The valley filled with long shadows. The wind died. Even the birds went silent. Then in the distance, torches appeared. 8 of them, moving slowly up the valley road toward the homestead. Marcus watched them come, felt his heart beating steady and sure in his chest, felt the weight of the rifle in his hands, felt the presence of Sam above him and Ayanna somewhere behind him and the children hidden below. This was it, the moment everything had been building toward. The torches grew closer. Close enough now that Marcus could make out faces in the firelight. Wade in front, Dax beside him. 6 others whose names Marcus knew and would remember. They stopped at the fence line, a line of fire against the gathering dark. Wade's voice carried across the yard. "Send out the Apache web. Send her out and we'll leave you be." Marcus stood, stepped to the edge of the porch. His voice when he answered was calm. "Final, the only way you get to her is over my dead body." Wade laughed, ugly and certain. "That can be arranged." "Then arrange it," Marcus said. The night held its breath. The torches flickered. And Marcus Webb stood between the woman he loved and the men who would take her from him, knowing that before dawn, one way or another, everything would change. The first shot shattered the night. Marcus heard the bullet punch through wood, felt splinters spray across his face. He dropped behind the porch railing as gunfire erupted from the line of torches. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness like lightning. The air filled with the crack of rifles and the whistle of lead seeking flesh. Sam returned fire from the roof. His shots measured, deliberate, a lifetime of hunting and war compressed into steady aim. One of Wade's men cried out, went down clutching his shoulder. The others scattered, seeking cover behind whatever they could find. Inside the house, Marcus heard Ayanna moving. Not hiding, preparing. He had taught her to shoot, but he had not expected her to fight. Apache women, she had told him once, fought beside their men when survival demanded it. Tonight demanded everything. She appeared at the window, rifle to her shoulder, her face calm in a way that spoke of old battles and older courage. When she fired, another of Wade's men fell back. Not dead, but wounded enough to retreat behind the barn. Wade's voice cut through the gunfire. "You made your choice, Webb. Now live with it." A torch arced through the air, end over end, trailing sparks like a dying star. It landed on the barn roof, caught, spread. Within seconds, flames were climbing the dry wood. The horses inside screamed, high and terrible, the sound of animals who knew they were about to burn alive. Marcus made his decision in an instant, sprinted from the porch toward the barn. Bullets chased him, kicked up dirt at his heels. One grazed his arm, hot and sharp. He barely felt it. He threw open the barn doors. Smoke billowed out. Inside, the horses reared and kicked. Eyes rolling white with terror, Marcus grabbed halters, led them out one by one. 3 horses, 4, the last one fighting him. Too panicked to understand rescue. A bullet punched into the doorframe beside his head. Marcus jerked the horse forward, got it clear, slapped its rump, and sent it running into the night. When he turned back toward the house, he saw Ayanna standing on the porch, silhouetted against the light from the burning barn. She had stepped out of cover, rifle raised, firing with a precision that spoke of something deeper than Marcus's brief lessons. She was shooting like a warrior. Dax Rimmer had been advancing on the house. Now he stumbled, grabbed his leg where Ayanna's bullet had found meat. He went down hard, his rifle skittering away across the dirt. Wade's face in the torchlight was a mask of rage and disbelief. "The Apache bitch can fight," he snarled. His men were faltering now, one wounded and retreating. Dax down. Another nursing a shoulder that hung at a wrong angle, courtesy of Sam's marksmanship. What should have been an easy raid had become a siege, and they were losing. Wade raised his arm, signaling his men to regroup, to fall back and reassess. But before he could give the order, one of his own men stepped forward. The youngest of them, a boy really, no more than 22. Cole was his name. Marcus had seen him around town, quiet, watchful, the kind who followed Wade because he had nowhere else to go. Cole walked away from Wade's line, slow, deliberate, his rifle held across his chest in a position that was neither threatening nor surrendering. "Where the hell you going?" Wade demanded. Cole stopped, turned to face his employer. His voice when he spoke carried across the yard clear as a bell. "I'm done." Wade's eyes narrowed. Done with what? This. Cole gestured at the burning barn, at the wounded men, at the homestead where a mother and her children huddled in darkness. Killing women and kids. My mother wouldn't stand for it. Wade's laugh was ugly. Your mother was a half-breed whore boy. What she'd stand for doesn't mean spit. The words hung in the air. Poisonous, final, revealing. Cole's face went white, then red, then something harder than either. You knew, he said. All along, you knew my mother was Apache and you used it. Held it over me. Made me think I had to prove I wasn't like her. Wade shrugged. Worked, didn't it? Kept you loyal. Cole moved fast, faster than Wade expected. His fist connected with Wade's jaw with a sound like a hammer on meat. Wade went down. Cole took his rifle, turned and walked across the invisible line that separated the two sides. He stopped in front of Marcus, met his eyes. There was shame there, and determination. I'll help you, Cole said, if you'll have me. Marcus looked at Ayanna, saw her nod. One small movement, permission, acceptance. You're on the wrong side of this, Marcus said, but it's not too late to be on the right one. Cole turned to face Wade, to face the men he had ridden with. His voice carried weight now, the weight of choice freely made. Anyone else want to keep fighting? We're a man who deals in hate, he called out. One of the older men, Bert Henderson, lowered his rifle, looked at Wade, at the burning barn, at his own conscience finally making itself heard. I didn't sign up to burn out families, Bert said. He walked away, not toward Marcus, just away, into the darkness, choosing neither side but refusing to choose wrong. That left Wade with 4 men. Marcus, Ayanna, Sam, and now Cole stood against them. Even odds. But the momentum had shifted. Wade could feel it, could see it in the way his remaining men glanced at each other. Uncertain, wondering if the fight was worth it. Wade raised his rifle, aimed at Marcus. His finger tightened on the trigger. Then a new sound cut through the night. Hoofbeats. A carriage. Coming fast up the valley road. Everyone froze. Weapons still raised but attention divided. The carriage emerged from darkness into the circle of firelight. Expensive, well-maintained, the kind that belonged to someone with money and the power that came with it. The door opened. A woman stepped out. She was dressed in silk the color of deep plum. Her hair was arranged in the latest fashion. Her bearing spoke of wealth and confidence and the absolute certainty that she would be obeyed. Victoria. Marcus felt the world tilt, felt years collapse, felt every carefully buried emotion surge up like water through cracked earth. Behind Victoria came a man, older, distinguished, Raymond Ashford, the man she had left Marcus for, the man who could give her the life she wanted. Victoria's eyes found Marcus, held. Something passed between them. Not love, not anymore, but recognition, the acknowledgement of shared history and shared pain. Wade recovered first. Mrs. Ashford, he said. With respect he had shown no one else. This is none of your concern. Victoria turned to look at him. Her expression was cool, measured. Everything about her said she was a woman used to being taken seriously. Everything in this valley is my concern, Wade. My husband owns half the land here. That includes the section you lease for your cattle. Wade's face went slack. I don't understand. Raymond Ashford stepped forward. His voice was cultured, Eastern, the voice of boardrooms and contracts and money that moved with the stroke of a pen. What my wife is saying, Mr. Garrett, is that we own your grazing rights, and we can revoke them. Immediately, if we choose. Wade looked between them, calculating, realizing he had just lost whatever leverage he thought he had. You're siding with him. Wade gestured at Marcus. With them, Victoria walked toward Marcus, stopped a few feet away, close enough to speak softly, close enough that he could smell the perfume she used to wear when they were married. May I speak with you, she asked. Privately, Marcus glanced at Ayanna, saw tension in every line of her body, saw fear that this woman from his past might somehow take him back, might undo everything they had built. He walked a short distance with Victoria, out of immediate earshot but still visible, still accountable. I came to apologize, Victoria said without preamble, for how I left, for what I said, for making you believe you were insufficient. Marcus studied her face, saw age there, not much, but some, saw sadness. regret, things he had not expected. Why now, he asked. Because I heard about you, she said, about the Apache woman and her children, about how you're fighting the whole valley to protect them. And I realized something. She paused, took a breath. You were never insufficient, Marcus. I was. I wanted things that didn't matter. Comfort, status, security, and I gave up the one thing that did matter. Love. Marcus felt nothing. No anger, no vindication. Just a kind of distant acknowledgement that they had both been young and foolish and had paid the price in different ways. Raymond treats me well, Victoria continued. He's a good man, but he's not you. And I've spent 3 years in a beautiful house feeling emptier than I ever felt in your cabin. I'm glad you came, Marcus said, but I don't know what you want me to say. I don't want you to say anything, Victoria replied. I want you to know that seeing you now, seeing you happy with her, with those children, it doesn't hurt the way I thought it would. It makes me realize I set you free, and you found something better. She smiled, sad but genuine. Be happy, Marcus. You deserve it. She turned and walked back to Raymond, spoke to him quietly. He nodded, turned to Wade. Mr. Garrett, you're fired, effective immediately. Remove yourself from my land by week's end, or I'll have the sheriff evict you. Wade's face went purple. You can't do this. I just did. Wade looked around, at his remaining men already backing away, at the burning barn, at Marcus standing firm with Ayanna beside him, at Cole who had betrayed him, at everything falling apart. He reached for his gun. Marcus saw it happening, saw Wade's hand drop, saw the desperation, the rage, the final spasm of a man who had lost everything and wanted to take someone down with him. But Ayanna was faster. Her shot echoed across the valley. Wade's gun flew from his hand, skittered across the dirt. Wade clutched his hand, howling, blood streaming between his fingers. Sheriff Holloway chose that moment to arrive. Late, cautious, but present. He took one look at the scene, at Wade wounded, at Dax on the ground, at the evidence of what had happened. Wade Garrett Holloway said with the weariness of a man who had avoided this moment as long as possible, you're under arrest. Arson, assault, attempted murder. Wade was still screaming, still clutching his hand. But it was over. His men had scattered. His power was broken. The valley would remember this night, would remember who stood and who ran, would remember that hate had lost. As Holloway led Wade away in irons, Victoria approached Ayanna. The two women stood face to face, past and present. What was and what is. Take care of him, Victoria said quietly. He's a better man than he believes. Ayanna's response was simple, I know. Victoria nodded, returned to her carriage. Raymond tipped his hat to Marcus, a gesture of respect between men who would never be friends but could acknowledge shared humanity. Then they were gone, disappearing into darkness, leaving Marcus and Ayanna and the children and the life they had chosen. Sam climbed down from the roof. Cole stood awkwardly to one side. The barn still burned, but the horses were safe. The house was intact. Everyone Marcus cared about was alive. Ayanna came to him, put her arms around him, held him with a fierceness that spoke of fear finally released, of tension breaking, of survival. It's over, she whispered. Marcus held her, breathed in the scent of her hair, felt the solid reality of her in his arms, felt the weight of what they had endured and the lightness of what they had won. Yes, he said, it's over. The next weeks passed in a blur of reconstruction and recovery. The barn had to be rebuilt. The community, shocked by Wade's arrest, slowly began to shift. Not everyone, but enough. Martha brought food. Dr. Whitmore stopped by to check on everyone. Miss Clara Brennan visited with books for Nasha. Cole stayed on, worked hard, proved himself daily. Marcus taught him the land. Ayanna taught him to see past the hate he'd been raised with. Slowly, the boy became a man, became family. Sam visited often, seemed lighter somehow, as if watching Marcus and Ayanna build their life together had lifted some of the weight he carried. 2 months after the siege, on a cool evening when the valley wind was soft and the stars were bright, Marcus took Ayanna to the cottonwood tree. The children were with Sam. Marcus had asked his friend to watch them for the evening. Sam had grinned, knowing, understanding without needing explanation. Under the tree, Marcus turned to Ayanna, took her hands in his, felt his heart beating hard against his ribs. I was dead before you came, he said. Not literally, but in every way that mattered. You brought me back to life. Ayanna's eyes were bright in the starlight, waiting. Nasha and Kayla Marcus continued. They're not just your children anymore. They're mine, in my heart, in every way that counts except paper. And I want to make it official. I want us to be a family, legal, recognized, permanent. He pulled out the beaded bracelet Sam had given him months ago. Halona's bracelet, held it up. In your tradition and mine, he said, will you marry me? Ayanna's tears came fast, silent, beautiful. She nodded, unable to speak, then found her voice. Yes, she whispered. 1,000 times yes. They married 3 weeks later. Dr. Whitmore officiated. Sam stood as witness. Martha, Miss Clara Brennan, Owen the blacksmith, and a handful of others attended. Small, intimate, perfect. Ayanna wore white doeskin, traditional Apache dress, beautiful and proud. Marcus wore his one good suit, pressed and clean. They spoke vows in English and Apache, promising to honor each other, to raise the children together, to build something lasting from the ashes of what they had lost. When Marcus kissed his wife, Nasha and Kaylee cheered. Sam wiped his eyes, and the cottonwood tree above them, barren for 7 years, showed the first small buds of spring. 6 months later, Ayanna came to Marcus with news that stopped his heart. I'm pregnant. Marcus stared at her, unable to process, unable to believe. Victoria had said it was impossible. The doctors had confirmed it. He could not father children. That was the truth he had lived with for years. But Ayanna was smiling, crying, holding his hand to her still flat belly. Are you certain, he managed? Dr. Whitmore confirmed it this morning. Marcus sat down, hard, felt everything he thought he knew about himself crack and reform. He wasn't broken, had never been broken, just hadn't found the right person, the right love, the right moment. Ayanna knelt beside him, took his face in her hands. You were never insufficient, she said. You just needed the right soil to bloom in. 9 months later, on a morning when the valley was soft with new rain, Ayanna gave birth. Dr. Whitmore attended. Sam paced outside. Cole kept Nasha and Kale occupied with stories and games. When the baby's cry filled the cabin, Marcus felt something in his chest expand. Something huge and terrifying and more wonderful than anything he had ever experienced. A daughter. Whitmore placed her in Marcus's arms. Tiny. Perfect. Her skin the color of a honey, her eyes dark and searching, a blend of both her parents, a bridge between worlds. What will you name her, Whitmore asked. Marcus looked at Sam through the window, at the old man who had given them so much, who had blessed their union with the gift of his own lost love. Halona, Marcus said, after someone who deserved to live, who died too soon, who taught us all that love is worth fighting for. Sam heard through the open window, turned away, but not before Marcus saw the tears on the old man's weathered face. That same morning, as if the universe itself was celebrating, the cottonwood tree burst into full bloom. White blossoms covered every branch, thick as snow, beautiful as hope. The first full flowering in 7 years. Marcus stood on the porch holding his daughter, Ayanna beside him. Nasha and Kaylee pressed against their legs, Sam and Cole on the steps, and they watched the petals drift on the wind like blessings, like promises kept, like proof that dead things could bloom again. 1 year passed, then 2. The homestead grew, expanded. Marcus and Cole built a new barn, larger than the old one. They added rooms to the cabin, space for the growing family, space for the life they were building. Other Apache families heard about Webb's Ridge, about the white rancher who had married one of their own, who protected them, who proved that coexistence was possible. 3 families came, then 4. Marcus helped them settle on unclaimed land nearby, helped them navigate the legal systems designed to keep them out. A small community formed, integrated, imperfect, but trying, learning, growing. Nasha grew into a young woman, graduated from Miss Brennan's school with honors, wanted to become a teacher herself, to help bridge the gap between cultures, between the old ways and new. Cale at 10 was all energy and curiosity. He followed Marcus everywhere, learned ranching, learned to read the land, learned that a man's worth came not from the color of his skin, but from the content of his character and the strength of his commitments. Helona toddled after her siblings, loved and protected by everyone, growing up in a world that, while not perfect, was better than the one her parents had known. Sam grew older, slower, but his eyes remained sharp, his wisdom deeper. He spent his evenings on Marcus and Ayana's porch, holding Helona, telling stories, living to see the redemption he had missed with his own son. Victoria never returned, but occasionally letters arrived, updates on her life, quiet acknowledgments of the choice she had made and the peace she had found with it. She and Raymond had adopted 2 children from San Francisco, were building their own version of family, their own path to meaning. Wade Garrett served 3 years in territorial prison, was released a broken man, moved east, was never seen in Ironwood Valley again. Cole became more than a ranch hand, became family, eventually married a girl from town, built his own cabin on Webland, raised his own children to know that people could change, could choose better, could break the cycles that had defined their parents. And through it all, the cottonwood tree bloomed, year after year, reliable as sunrise, beautiful as hope, a living symbol of everything they had built, everything they had survived, everything they had become. On a summer evening 5 years after Marcus had found Ayana in his henhouse, the family gathered under the tree. Marcus and Ayana, Nasha and Kelly, Helona now walking and talking, Sam and Cole's young wife Sarah. They ate together, talked together, watched the sunset together, a family bound not just by blood, but by choice, by courage, by the refusal to let hate define them. Kaylee, now 11, asked the question children always asked, "Papa, will the tree always bloom?" Marcus looked at Ayana, at the woman who had wandered into his life with nothing but hope and hunger, and 2 children who needed protecting. At the woman who had become his wife, his partner, his proof that love could overcome anything. "As long as we tend it," Marcus said, "as long as we remember that even broken things can heal, even dead things can bloom, as long as we choose love over fear. Yes, the tree will bloom." Sam, older now but still present, added his own wisdom. "This tree is more than wood and sap," he said. "It's memory. It's promise. It's proof that what we build together is stronger than what we build alone." Helona climbed into Marcus's lap, looked up at him with eyes that held both his stubbornness and Ayana's wisdom. "Tell me the story, Papa, about how you and Mama met." Marcus smiled, glanced at Ayana, saw her smile back, saw the years in her eyes, the struggles, the victories, the ordinary miracle of having survived and thrived and built something lasting. "Well, little one," Marcus began, "it started in a hen house at dawn. Your mama was stealing eggs, and I almost made the worst mistake of my life." The child's eyes went wide. "What happened?" "I lowered my gun," Marcus said, "and chose mercy instead of fear. And everything changed." Ayana leaned against him, her head on his shoulder, her hand in his, their children around them, their chosen family present and accounted for. Above them, the cottonwood blossoms stirred in the evening wind. White petals drifted down, soft as snow, gentle as forgiveness, persistent as hope. The wind called it now. The homestead where a white rancher and an Apache widow proved that love was stronger than hate, that families could be chosen, that healing was possible even in a land soaked with blood and sorrow. And every evening as the sun set over Ironwood Valley, you could see them there under the blooming tree. Proof that miracles happen not in grand gestures, but in daily choices. In the decision to love instead of fear, to stand instead of run, to bloom instead of wither. Marcus Webb, who had once believed he had nothing left to give, now knew he had everything. Not wealth, not fame, not power, but something infinitely more valuable. A family who chose each other every day. A love that had survived everything the world threw at it. A legacy that would outlive them all. And on quiet nights when the children were asleep and Marcus and Ayana sat alone under the stars, they would remember. Remember the hen house, the cracked egg, the choice that changed everything. Remember that sometimes the greatest love stories begin with mercy, with the simple act of seeing another person's humanity when the world insists you shouldn't, with lowering the gun when every instinct says to fire, and they would hold each other, grateful, humbled, blessed beyond measure, knowing that they had been given something rare and precious and worth every hardship they had endured to find it. They had been given each other, and that was enough, more than enough. It was everything.